Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shells, death slicers, peasants, vassals, minions. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And today I want to talk about Israel again and their global propaganda apparatus. And sometimes I think there's no country quite like Israel in molding public opinion. And like I've mentioned in many videos about this topic, sometimes it makes you wonder if there's so much guilt or paranoia that they feel the need to mold public opinion worldwide. And they have not only the use of certainly all the Israeli apparatus to do so, but their efforts are compounded by the vast media machine in the United States and all the operations in the United States, as well as the United States government itself operating as a propaganda machine for Israel. And they recently, in this new assault on Gaza, we've got stories of Israel infiltrating social networking. And this was inevitable. And of course, they've been doing it for many, many years already, as has everyone, because they've learned the lessons that what an impact they can have on public opinion, as well as motivating the public to action through social media. And so Israel's done just that. So they've saturated the social media campaigns with these catchy slogans. And that's another part of this that goes back to the likes of Edward Bernays and other scientists of shaping human thought. You have to make it simple and emotional and memorable, catchy. And so we have this propaganda campaign coming from Israel where it says some bomb shelters shelter people, some bomb shelters shelter bombs. And of course that's very primitive, very catchy, and gets their point across. And takes a very complex issue, makes it very simplistic. But it has to achieve a broad spectrum, it has to appeal to a broad spectrum. So, and then they have another one where they use little pictures, and they ask, where do Gaza terrorists hide their weapons? Houses, mosques, hospitals, and schools. And of course, most of these claims have been disqualified over the years, and not any legitimate evidence provided to back up this massive claim, especially when you look at the amount of damage that's caused in the name of supposedly there's weapons hiding in every single hospital, every single mosque, every single school in Gaza City. It seems rather preposterous. And and then the fact that all this material is spread through social media, through the Israeli military. And then they're augmented by this whole student program. I did a video previously about Israel basically giving out scholarships to those who are willing to, college students who are willing to go and do PR work, propaganda work for the Israeli government and their policy, their foreign and domestic policies online and social media. And I guess it's called Habara. And it goes back as far as 2007 at least. And then we also have during this campaign, apparently the Israeli Student Union set up a war room to sell the whole Gaza onslaught on Facebook. It had over 400 volunteers participate in this. And then, like I say, this juxtaposition of message with infographics. This is the wave of the future. We see this with the group that the United States uses to destabilize countries, this group called Canvas, and they have a lot of insignias and signs and everything pre-made. So if you want to start a revolution, these time-honored and carefully crafted infographics are invaluable. And a good example of that is in this Israeli propaganda. There's a diagram of a scary bunker house with multiple levels underneath, with every kind of armament stored that you can imagine. It reminds me of the Rumsfeld diagrams of the super evil underground complexes that Osama bin Laden supposedly was hiding in the Tora Bora Mountains, when they were actually really hiding in actual caves. But they actually had the nerve to get up in front of public and show these diagrams of these bunkers. And Rumsfeld, of course, carefully pointed out that there's more than one of these. And so anyway, not one of these super scary bunker houses that's supposedly in Gaza has been revealed so far to back up these diagrams they spread around. And then there's another one of their catchy phrases is Israel uses weapons to protect its citizens. Hamas uses civilians to protect its citizens. Or Hamas uses civilians to protect its weapons. Very simplistic jingoism, and really obscures the actual facts. This whole human shield argument that the Israeli government's been using is overwrought and overreaching, and for them to keep using that as an excuse for the kind of destruction they use is certainly a sign of a successful propaganda that people are being sold on that message. And like I mentioned before, not only do we have Israel having a massive propaganda, global propaganda machine, and certainly emanating from Israel, but then they also have the combination of the United States. And in fact, there's 300 national Jewish organizations in the United States with a combined budget of $6 billion. So a huge amount of money. You know, people hate lobbyists, and yet for some reason they don't have any problem with the army of Jewish lobbyists from 300 different organizations. In a country like the United States, whose Jewish population is only 6%. And we have also these major, huge groups that wield a lot of power, especially in Congress and amongst our, other members of our government. Anti-Defamation League, the American Jewish Committee, the Zionist Organization of America, and B'nai B'rith. And these groups, just like the Israeli government, are out in social media, out there buying media space to propagate their particular message. And that's one of the things that keeps this illusion that this special relationship between Israel and the United States works. The United States and Israel are each other's useful idiots. And it's no more complex than that. And then we have AIPAC, of course, the Mac Daddy of Israeli propaganda groups, and the ones that grease the entire United States government with massive amounts of money. Their annual budget is $60 million. That goes a long way in Washington, D.C. I don't need to explain that to anybody. And the AIPAC has 60,000 members, and they wield an extreme amount of power. And if anyone doubts that, all they need to do is look at the roster of people who line up to speak at these AIPAC events and get their wheels greased. Not to mention the fact that there's a massive number of dual citizenship American-Israeli citizens operating in our United States government, our Congress. And whose allegiances do you think they're going to lie with? I would certainly say they'd be debatable at best. And then one of the more ironic developments recently, as far as this global propaganda network that Israel uses. And let me caveat this by, I'm not singling out Israel per se, I'm just holding them the same standard as everyone else, because I have no illusions that almost every other country on the earth, including the United States and Russia, all use these same propaganda methods and then some. We know the United States is a government and military is operating on social networks as well. So I just want to point this out, that I'm not necessarily singling out Israel. I just want to point out that people need to realize how much influence Israel's propaganda machine has in the world, that they can turn an event in like Gaza totally around to make Israel the victim and Hamas the aggressors. It's an astounding propaganda success, the likes I can't remember seeing. Well, maybe the Iraq War, that was an astounding propaganda success. That was the only thing successful about it. So then, so let me get back to this last story. We have, of course, the idea that Gaza may join the International Criminal Court, and Israel's afraid of being dragged in front of it, and so they sent a delegation. Met with a U.S. delegation. Of including, ironically, Representative Steve Israel. Netanyahu is asking for help keeping the Palestinians out of the International Criminal Court, and also making sure that Israel's not brought up on war crimes charges. And in fact, a spokesman said, quote, Netanyahu asks us to work together to ensure that this strategy of going to the International Criminal Court doesn't succeed. He wants the U.S. to use all the tools at our disposal to, number one, make sure the world knows that war crimes were not committed by Israel, and that they were committed by Hamas, and that Israel should not be held to a double standard, unquote. I find that amusing and ironic and sad. And then Netanyahu goes on to say, quote, there are some in the international community who want to investigate Israel for the war crime of simply defending themselves, unquote. It's gotten to the point where almost everything that comes out of Netanyahu's mouth, and most of the other spokesmen for the Israeli government at this point, are spewing nothing but revisionist history and propaganda. And this is what we expect from elites, oligarchs, handlers, bootlickers, opportunists, politicians like this all over the world. So once again, not picking on Israel, just people need to open their eyes to that Israel is not this religious, democratic fantasy land that a lot of people imagine. It's a very troubled country with a lot of complex issues, and the international community needs to pay a lot more attention. And actually, most of the international community is paying attention, because pretty much the only friend Israel has in the world anymore is the United States. Up to several years ago, they had a favorable opinion, only in the United States, majority of favorable opinion of the public, only in the United States and Nigeria, and now Nigeria is off that list. So it's just the United States. So anyway, everybody needs to get on board. So there we have it, a little look at the global propaganda machine, a very broad outline with very few details. I apologize, but at least we get an idea that there is a gigantic propaganda machine working on a global scale between Israel and the United States, and that covers a great deal of ground, and it's very effective indeed, as we see right now. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?